And welcome back to Rise Up with B. Dave Walters, broadcasting live on Party 93.4 FM and 94.9 out of Hudson Valley, New York, worldwide on Party934.com. And the video stream of this is broadcasting live on Justin.tv/B. Dave Walters. That was the fifth dimension with Aquarius, Let the Sun Shine. If you can sit still during that, you need to check your pulse because you might be dead. I mean, I realize it's early or it's late, pending where you're listening to me right now, but that song is pretty awesome. So, see that, hippies? I'm meeting you halfway. Got a little bit of the fifth dimension going. Okay, so before I start talking about some of these things, because you can take things like the Tree of Life, you can take things like the I Ching, you can take things like the elements, and some of these things that I'm going to explain to you, and you can use it to perform divination, to see things, what's going on in the world right now, to understand the past, and to understand the future. And the first and simplest question out of this is it somehow a sin to know this? This comes up, ooh, I can't know that, that's a sin. Well, besides that, we just talked about the fact that I'm not 100% sure that God really thinks about things the way that we do, at least in that respect. But the question you have to ask yourself is who's more likely to be offended? The creator who set the universe in motion, who gave us minds capable of observing it and drawing connections between things, who set those seven universal laws that we talked about in motion, one of which being the law of correspondence, which is why this works in the first place, who quite probably sent angels down to people to explain it to them directly and put it here for our own knowledge. So who's more likely to be offended? The God that put that there and made it possible for us to see it, or the men who have built churches and inserted themselves between us and God? Because if you can go straight to God and understand what's going on, then suddenly you don't need your go-betweens anymore. And not a lot of donations that get made from people that aren't coming to church, right? Now, I don't mean to sound too harsh. Church has a lot of value. I love church. But the fact is there's people that take that authority and they twist it and they use it to manipulate people. And they set up the stage where when you can be exposed to knowledge that can empower you and that can help your life make more sense, then that can actually become a bad thing because, again, if you don't need intermediary, which this is something that I never understood, by the way. If you look, Jesus Christ's whole message, you don't need anybody to go talk to God for you. You can talk to God directly, right? Buddha's whole message, you can understand the infinite directly. Don't need anybody to do it for you. Most prophets' messages are you don't need an intermediary. You can go to God directly. And then we as people keep finding ways to insert blocks, right? To insert people in between, to insert people to read the scripture and then tell it to us on Sunday morning, right? Which you don't have to have. So obviously this is a choice that you have to make for yourself, but I think it's kind of clear what I feel about it. So it's my job to just expose you to ideas, concepts, show you how to use it. It's up to you to decide whether or not you actually want to take it in, whether or not you want to apply it, whether or not you want to believe it. I try not to share a whole lot of things that require believing because it's kind of like you can just kind of test it and it'll work. I don't want you to put any more faith in me than anything else because like I told you before, man, I don't know. I'm not certain. I mean, I know what I believe, I know what I've experienced, I know what I've learned, what I've read, and I know what works for me. But like I said, nobody knows for 100% where we come from, where we're going, right? I just try and give you more maps to make it through this crazy journey. So the first thing is the tree of life. Now this is difficult, and the tree of life is an idea from Kabbalah, which is Jewish mysticism. And mysticism, a lot of times people hear words like this because words have become very loaded over time. People are like mysticism, ooh, that's evil, it's devil worship. No, all mysticism means is talking to God directly. That's it. Mystical experiences, connection with the divine, mystical. Even things like the word occult. You say, ooh, occult, that's devil worship. No, actually, the definition of the word occult means hidden. That's it. Your social security number is occult. You know, your bank account number is occult. If you've hidden it from somebody, that's all it means, right? You see how we've loaded all this stuff to mean all these things that they don't really mean, and we've kind of done it for no particular reason, right? Yeah. So the tree of life is an explanation. Well, first of all, it's an image. And this is the hardest part about this, and this is really why I've been stalling talking about this with you, because they're symbols. The whole point behind a symbol is you can look at it and it contains a lot of information. So I have to try and describe it to you who are hearing me in a way that is going to make sense to you. So if you've seen the Kabbalistic Tree of Life, I'm talking about that. If you haven't seen it, imagine a map that's got 10 jewels. They almost look like marbles. At the top, there's 1, 2, 3 that form kind of like an upward turned triangle. Immediately below that, there's 3 more that form like a downward facing triangle. Below that, there's 3 more that have a downward facing triangle. And down at the bottom, there's just 1 by itself. So 3 gems that make an upward facing triangle, 3 gems that make a downward facing triangle, another 3 gems that make a downward facing triangle, and 1 little gem or marble sitting down at the bottom by itself. Okay? And then you draw lines that connect each one of them. And between those 10 jewels, there's actually 22 lines, 22 ways you make of connecting them. And that's the tree of life. It'll make more sense if you see it. So when you get to a computer, if you're listening to me online, Google the tree of life, you can see it. If not, when you get to a computer, Google tree of life, you'll see what I'm talking about. Now, the tree of life is basically a map, right? You've probably heard this in the Garden of Eden story, that there was 2 trees that mankind was forbidden to eat from. And there was the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life, which would have enabled them to live forever. And they ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil and knew their nakedness, and things kind of went downhill from there. Now, here's an interesting thing. Have you ever read the story of Genesis and ever kind of thought about the fact that it seems odd that God gets so upset over mankind being bestowed with knowledge? Now, the standard Sunday school explanation for this, and what I was taught certainly, is that we don't have to understand it. God told them not to do it. And really, that's the only justification that it takes. That might be true. And that the serpent comes along, and you notice the serpent says that basically he's trying to keep you ignorant. And even then, if you read when Adam and Eve get expelled from the garden, it's because God is talking to the angels, which, by the way, all through Genesis, when God is referring to the creation of mankind, the word used in Hebrew is Elohim, which is plural. God doesn't say, let me make man. God says, let us make man in our image, and let us get rid of them before they become like us. If they eat of the tree of life, they will become like us, which is why Adam and Eve had to go from the garden. So has it seemed strange to you that basically Adam and Eve were kind of meant to stay kind of like in a prison? That it was like a resort, but it was like a prison? And there's a reason why that is. Besides the fact that there's different ways to interpret the story, that the book of Genesis that we've got is actually an adaptation of a much older story from Sumeria. It's called the Enuma Elish, right? And in the original Garden of Eden story, the snake is the good guy. The snake is the god Enki, who is trying to free humanity from captivity. And the bad guy is a god named Enlil, who wanted to keep humanity bound and wanted to keep humanity ignorant. And when the Hebrews did their time in Babylon, they learned a lot of these old Sumerian stories and they brought it back, and it became part of the Jewish tradition. So if that story ever struck you as strange, it's like, why does God want to keep everybody trapped and stupid? Is because in the original story, that was the bad guy. The devil wanted to keep people trapped and stupid, and God was trying to get everybody out of the garden. So that's an interesting thing there. But the tree of life then, good or bad, is the knowledge that can help you become like God, or for our purposes, help you to know and understand God better. And know, by extension, know and understand your life, and really know and understand anything. So the tree of life is basically a map. But instead of a map showing the spatial relationships and routes between different places, the tree of life is a map of consciousness, both human consciousness and divine consciousness. All sorts of processes can be shown by this tree, and it's usually shown as the plan by which God made the universe, but it can refer to any creative act, or with a little bit of manipulation, any act at all, honestly. The tree of life is made up of spheres, or sephirot. That's what they're called in Hebrew. By the way, my Hebrew is terrible. I apologize to any Hebrew listeners that when they hear these words, they're all like, but I do my best. In fact, I'm going to try not to use a whole lot of Hebrew because I'm thinking most of you probably aren't fluent, but I'm still going to at least tell you what these things are called. So these spheres are called sephirot. Sephirot. Those are the gems or marbles that I've mentioned before, and the paths that connect the sephiroth together. Each sephirah, that's the plural, has a name and sometimes several names, and is associated with various ideas and concepts. And very brief descriptions of these 10 sephiroth followed. Now, let me say, these things that I'm talking about are ideas that you can literally study for your entire life and never understand fully. So it's really impossible for me to explain this in just a few minutes in such a way that you get the totality of it. So I'm not even trying to do that because I don't understand the totality of it. But I just want you to get an idea, a general idea. And if you want to know more, obviously there's a lot more studying you can do, or you can ask me about it or submit a question. Okay, so the first one, the gem at the very top of this tree of life, is called Keter, or the crown, and it represents absolute unity. It was the first of the Sephiroth, and to be created, and all the rest came from this one. Okay, the next one is Hokmah, and it's wisdom, and it's the supernal Father, the Divine Father, and it is the basis of the masculine energy, and it represents dynamic creation. Right. The next one is Bina, which is understanding, or the supernal mother, and it's the feminine principle. This is the sphere of both receptivity and resistance, of love and law. If you remember from when we talked about the 7 universal laws, men put out, women take in, right? Here it is again, right? The truth is universal. You're going to see it everywhere. The next one is Hesed, which is translated as mercy, and it is also called Gejula, or majesty, and it represents blessings, grace, kindness, in general, positive energy, just good things. The next one is Gabura, or Gavura, and it is the sphere of severity. Other titles for it include Din, which means judgment, or Pachad, which means fear. This is the sphere of hard times and destruction, right? Like yuckiness lives in Gabura. The next one is Tiferet, which is the center of the tree of life, and it means beauty. It is the balance between the spiritual realm above and the physical world below, like everything kind of intersects at Tiferet. The next one is Netzach, which means victory, and it is the sphere of creation, intuition, relationships, and most importantly of all, the emotions. They're from Netzach. The next one is Hod, which rhymes with road, and is the realm of all human mind and its capacity to reason. Hod means glory, because the crowning glory of mankind is the intellect. The next one, number 9, is Yesod, and it's the foundation. This is the place of the unconscious beliefs and instinctive desire. It has strong ties to sexuality and to the libido and the sex drive and the reproductive instinct. And finally is Malkut, which is the physical world, which is where we are. This Sephirah is called the kingdom, and it's where all action takes place. And it's the final result of all the Sephirah and the creative energy given form. Okay. Now think about that. That's all the distance between God at the tippy top of creation and us way down at the bottom. All of those things, which are actually entire worlds and entire universes that exist between us and the absolute at the top, right? God's at the tippy top, we're a little bit down at the bottom. Now, there are several subdivisions within this tree, okay? But when you look at the image, you can see that there are 3 pillars made up by the different spheres that are in the vertical line. You can go up the far left side, which is the pillar of severity. You can go up the far right side, which is the pillar of mercy.
Or you can go up the central column, which is the pillar of harmony or the pillar of